In 2026, the largest sporting event on Earth lands in the middle of the United States. Not New York, not Los Angeles, not the coastal cities the world already pictures when it thinks of America. Instead, three places most international visitors would struggle to describe: Houston, Dallas, and Kansas City. On paper, they are host cities. On the ground, they are something more interesting. A corridor that reveals what Central America actually looks like when the world is forced to pay attention. Houston is one of the most globally connected cities on the continent, yet almost everything about it is built around the car. Dallas-Fort Worth is growing faster than most countries can track, but its identity keeps shifting with every new suburb. And Kansas City sits on a state line most people do not know exists, quietly anchoring a crossroads that has been strategically central for 2 centuries. This is not a stadium story, this is the map behind the event. From Houston to Kansas City, this corridor stretches roughly 750 miles. That is farther than London to Rome. Overlay it on a map of Europe, and the corridor crosses multiple countries. Here, it crosses 2 states. Most international fans will land, see freeways and strip malls, and assume the 3 cities are interchangeable. They are not. Each one carries a different contradiction that the event will make visible. Combined, the 3 metro areas hold roughly 20 million people. That is more than the Netherlands. Yet outside the United States, these metros are still filed under flyover country, places you cross on the way to somewhere else. The World Cup is sending more than 20 matches to this corridor alone. That is not a token gesture. It means hundreds of thousands of visitors will land in places that were never designed around the pedestrian. So the real question is not whether these cities can host a tournament, it is what the tournament reveals about them. Houston Test Movement, a freeway metropolis asked to move global crowds on foot in summer heat. Dallas-Fort Worth tests growth, a metro adding people faster than it can define what it is becoming. And Kansas City tests centrality. A 2-state crossroads the world is about to notice for the first time. None of this is about whether the stadiums are ready. The stadiums are fine. What matters is what happens between the stadiums, on the streets, in the heat, across the distances that define daily life here. The World Cup is not going to reinvent these places, but it is going to X-ray them. And what that X-ray shows is a version of America most outsiders have never been asked to look at closely. To understand why this corridor matters, start where the contradiction is sharpest. In a city that welcomes the world in 145 languages, but was built so you never have to walk. Houston is the fourth largest city in the United States, one of the most ethnically diverse places on the continent, and home to the world's largest medical centre. It is also a place where driving 20 minutes to buy groceries is considered perfectly normal. A city this global should not be this hard to cross on foot. The Greater Houston Metro covers roughly 10,000 square miles. Overlay that footprint on London and it swallows the entire M25 orbital with room to spare. NRG Stadium, where World Cup matches will be played, sits about 30 miles south of Bush Intercontinental Airport. In most host cities around the world, that distance would cross national borders. In Houston, it is just the space between 2 points on the same freeway. Houston moves almost entirely by car. The metro area has over 600 miles of freeway. Its light rail covers a fraction of the city, a single main line running about 13 miles through the centre. Most visitors will rely on rideshare services or rental cars to get between the airport, their hotel, the stadium, and anything else worth seeing. And they will do it in June and July heat when the heat index regularly pushes past 105 degrees Fahrenheit. For fans used to walking between venues in compact European or Asian host cities, Houston rewrites the rules. Distance is not measured in blocks. It is measured in highway exits. Part of the reason Houston looks like this is a policy choice most outsiders have never heard of. Houston has no zoning code. It is one of the only major cities in the United States that never adopted one. In practical terms, that means a townhouse can sit next to a parking garage, a church next to a nightclub, a medical office next to a taco stand. There is no master grid separating residential from commercial from industrial. The city grew wherever demand pulled it. And that freedom is exactly why the distances between key locations can feel so vast and so random. It is not poor planning. It is a specific kind of planning, one that prioritizes flexibility over legibility. But here is what the freeway image hides. Houston is one of the most culturally layered cities in the Western Hemisphere. More than 145 languages are spoken across the metro area. The Bel Air corridor holds one of the largest Chinatowns in the American South. The Mahatma Gandhi district is a hub for the city's enormous South Asian community. Nigerian, Salvadoran, Vietnamese, and Ethiopian neighbourhoods sit within a few freeway exits of one another. The diversity is not an add-on, it is the city. Except almost none of it is visible unless you leave the highway and step inside a strip mall that looks identical to every other strip mall. From the road. Houston's richness is real, but it hides behind a windshield. The neighbourhood closest to the World Cup action is Edo, east downtown. Over the past decade, it has transformed from industrial lots into a district of breweries, murals and mid-rise apartments. It is the part of Houston that most closely resembles a walkable urban neighbourhood. But step 2 blocks in the wrong direction, and you're back on a 6-lane road with no sidewalk and no shade. That is the tension Houston carries into 2026. The city will build temporary fan zones and pedestrian corridors. It will shuttle people on buses and trains along the light rail spine, but the underlying geometry of the city does not change for an event. What visitors will experience is a global city forced to improvise walkability on infrastructure designed for the opposite. Residents already know how to navigate this. They do it every day. The question is whether hundreds of thousands of strangers, on foot and in the heat, will understand a city that asks you to drive before it. Lets you discover what it actually is. Houston tests whether a car city can briefly behave like a walking city. 4 hours north, another Texas metro tests something different, whether explosive growth creates identity or erases it. Houston's test is movement, but 4 hours north on Interstate 45, the corridor's second host city faces a different question entirely. Dallas-Fort Worth is not one city. It is a constellation of over 200 municipalities sharing a name, an airport, and an argument about what American success looks like now. The metro area covers more than 9,000 square miles. If it were a country, its population of nearly 8 million would rank it alongside Switzerland. More people moved here in the last decade than live in entire European capitals. The question is what they are moving into. At the geographic centre of this constellation sits DFW Airport. It covers roughly 17,000 acres, larger in area than the island of Manhattan. That single piece of infrastructure reshapes everything around it: commute patterns, corporate location decisions, and the suburban geography of the entire metro. Companies follow the airport. In recent years, major corporations including Toyota, Charles Schwab and Caterpillar moved their headquarters to the DFW metro. Jobs follow the headquarters, people follow the jobs, and suburbs follow the people. The growth animation of the DFW metro over the past 30 years looks less like a city expanding and more like a slow tide spreading across. The prairie. Frisco, which had fewer than 35,000 residents in 2000, now holds more than 220,000. Prosper and Salina, once rural crossroads, are among the fastest growing cities in the country. The suburbs promise space, newness, good schools, and a version of the American dream calibrated to the 21st century. But the commute reveals the cost. From outer suburbs like Forney or Prosper, a morning drive to downtown Dallas can take 45 minutes to an hour each way. Growth like this creates a metro that is constantly redefining itself. The highway signs can barely keep up. New schools open before the neighbourhoods around them are finished. The result is a metro where the question is not whether it is growing, but whether the growth adds up to an identity or just more square footage. And to understand that tension, you have to see the two anchor cities that give this metro its hyphenated name. Dallas projects corporate ambition. Its skyline is glass and steel. Its arts district is one of the largest urban cultural complexes in the country. The city's self-image leans toward Polish, headquarters relocations, investor conferences and championship bids. 30 miles west, Fort Worth tells a completely different story. The stockyards still run a twice-daily cattle drive through the streets. Fort Worth's identity begins with ranching and never entirely leaves it behind. But Fort Worth also holds the Kimball Art Museum and one of the most respected cultural districts in the American South. It is cowboy heritage and contemporary art in the same zip code. Two cities 30 miles apart inside the same metro, one built on corporate aspiration, the other on cultural memory, both growing, both competing. Between these two anchors, millions of people navigate the daily arithmetic of the DFW growth machine. In Rockwall, east of Dallas, a family can live on a lakefront for a fraction of what the same space would cost in Plano or Frisco. The trade-off is an hour on the highway, twice a day, 5 days a week. That is the real price of affordable space in a booming metro. Closer in, Plano offers corporate proximity and walkable town centres, but housing prices have climbed sharply and the compromise shifts from time to money. Every suburb in the DFW metro promises a version of success, but every version comes with a different trade-off, and the growth keeps rewriting the terms. This is the landscape a World Cup visitor will land in, not a compact European host city, not a walkable downtown. A metro that measures itself in highway exits. Visitors will see the stadium and the skyline. Residents navigate the territory in between, the strip malls, the commuter arteries, the spaces no brochure photographs. Dallas-Fort Worth is not what outsiders reduce it to. It is not just a business skyline, and it is not just endless suburbia. It is both in tension, building something no one has a finished name for. The machine keeps building outward. New highways are funded before the neighbourhoods they serve are even named. Whether that growth is building a clearer regional identity or scattering it further is a question DFW has not yet answered. And no single event will settle it. But the World Cup will at least force the world to look past the stereotypes and see a place where 8 million people are quietly testing what American aspiration becomes at this scale. Dallas-Fort Worth grows by building outward. But the corridor's third host city gained its importance by sitting still, right at the centre of a map most people never look at carefully. Why would a global event choose a city that most outsiders cannot even place on the correct side of a state line? Ask most people outside the United States which state Kansas City is in, and the hesitation tells you everything. The answer is both. A state line runs directly through the middle of the metro. Kansas City exists because two rivers meet here. The Missouri and the Kansas converge at a point that turned a riverside trading post into the gateway for westward expansion across an entire continent. That geographic logic never stopped mattering. Kansas City became one of the largest rail freight hubs in North America. Today, roughly 85% of the American population lives within a 2-day truck drive of this city. It is not centrally located by accident. It was built on centrality. Look at a freight radius map and Kansas City sits at the hub. Highways fan outward in every direction. The city is not a stop on the way somewhere, it is the place where routes converge. But logistics alone do not explain what Kansas City feels like. The 18th and Vine district was one of the birthplaces of American jazz. Charlie Parker learned to play here. The barbecue tradition is not a marketing invention, it is civic identity, passed through generations of pitmasters and neighbourhood joints. A free streetcar now connects downtown neighbourhoods, a small but deliberate investment in the kind of walkable public life that most American metros of this size abandoned decades ago. Kansas City is not waiting for permission to reinvent itself. The metro spans 2 million people across 2 states, and it has been preparing for a bigger stage long before the World Cup arrived. Houston tests movement, Dallas tests growth. Kansas City tests whether being central on a map can finally mean being central in the world's imagination. But across all 3 cities, one question connects them. What happens when places built around private space and the car are asked to create moments of shared public life? By now, you have seen 3 different versions of the same American corridor. Houston, wrapped inside a freeway grid. Dallas-Fort Worth, redefining itself with every new suburb. Kansas City, bisected by a state line most outsiders cannot place. Each city passed a different test, but underneath all 3 is the same unresolved question. It is not about stadiums or budgets, it is about gathering. The World Cup demands something these cities were never designed to provide easily. Hundreds of thousands of strangers sharing the same physical space, on foot, in heat. Look at any of these stadium districts from above. The building is a fraction of the land, the rest is parking. Land was cheap. Car access was the priority, pedestrians were an afterthought. Now the World Cup is asking these districts to reverse engineer pedestrian life into spaces that were never built for it. Each city is adapting differently. In Houston, the area east of downtown, known locally as Edu, has been transforming from warehouses and rail yards into a walkable corridor aimed at connecting the stadium district to the city centre. In Dallas, experiments like the AT&T Discovery District have tried to create open-air public gathering spaces downtown, something the metro historically outsourced to malls and private venues. And Kansas City has a structural advantage the Texas cities lack. Its free downtown streetcar already connects neighborhoods, entertainment districts, and the convention center along a walkable spine. But a streetcar serving a few miles of downtown does not solve a metro where the stadium sits far from the urban core and most visitors will still arrive by car. For residents who live near these districts, the event brings a strange mix. Temporary fan zones mean foot traffic and business for local shops. They also mean road closures, noise and pressure on neighbourhoods not designed for overflow crowds. The real question is not whether the cities can handle a month of crowds. They will manage. The question is what happens afterward. Do the temporary pedestrian corridors become permanent? Do the fan zones teach these cities something about public life they decide to keep? Or does everything revert to car-dependent normal the moment the last match ends? That tension is what connects Houston's freeways, Dallas's sprawl, and Kansas City's civic ambition into one story. Not stadiums, not budgets. The simple act of people being together in the same place. The stadiums will fill, the fan zones will open. The question that outlasts the event is simpler and harder. When the world leaves, what do these cities keep, and what goes back to normal. The stadiums will empty, the fan zones will be dismantled, the flights will reroute to the next host country. But something will have shifted, not because these cities changed overnight, but because the world was finally forced to look. Major sporting events rarely transform host cities as dramatically as the pre-event narrative promises. What these events reliably do is update outsider perception. And for cities whose reputations lag decades behind their reality, that update matters. Houston's freeways will still be wide, the distances between neighborhoods will not shrink. But a city where 145 languages are spoken daily will be harder to describe as just another Texas highway town. Dallas-Fort Worth suburbs will keep spreading. The growth machine does not pause for a tournament. But the metro that already handles more air passengers than most countries will have a name the world can finally connect to a place. The state line will still split Kansas City in two, the river will keep moving underneath the bridges. But a crossroads that anchors freight routes for half the continent will be harder to file under flyover. The real legacy of a global event in places like these is not the infrastructure that gets built, it is the perception that gets updated. These are not places waiting to be discovered, they have been consequential for generations. The event just updates the map in everyone else's head. Look at the corridor again, a freeway metropolis that holds more languages than most European capitals. A growth machine rebuilding the American suburban dream in real time. And a two-state crossroads that anchors the freight routes keeping the continent moving. Not flyover, not underdog, strategically central, culturally layered and still being built. The 2026 World Cup will not reinvent Houston, Dallas or Kansas City. No single event does that. But it will do something that matters for places whose reputations have lagged decades behind their reality. It will force the world to look carefully. And what the world will find is not what it expected. Not simple stadium stops, not generic Middle American backdrops. Instead, a corridor where consequence has been hiding in plain sight. The freeways will still be wide, the suburbs will keep spreading. The state line will still split Kansas City in two. But the next time someone draws a mental picture of the centre of the United States, these three cities will be harder to leave off the map. The next time someone asks you to picture the centre of the United States, what do you see now?